Hey there, sleepy traveler. Before we begin, find that perfect position, maybe tucked in like a cinnamon bun, or starfished across the bed like the hero you are. Let your shoulders relax, let your breath settle, and let your mind wander far, far away. Northward, in fact, to the frost-tipped lands of ancient Scandinavia, where the nights were long, the gods were moody, and someone was always throwing a hammer at something. Tonight, we're getting to know Thor. Not the Marvel guy with impeccable biceps and a tragic haircut phase, but the original Norse god of thunder. He of the booming sky, the flying goats, the battle roars, and, sometimes, the surprisingly soft heart. Thor is a storm in deity form, loud, brave, easily irritated, and fiercely protective. He's the kind of mythological figure who solves problems with one strategy: hit it really hard. And somehow, it works. But don't worry, this isn't a story full of shouting. We're going to tell it like an old fireside tale, soft-spoken and soothing. Even when Thor is yeeting a giant into the stratosphere, so close your eyes if they're not already closed. Breathe in slowly, and imagine the smell of pine trees, the chill of sea air, and the faint rumble of distant thunder. Because once upon a time, before the world had apps or Mondays, there was a god. His name was Thor, and this is his story. Let's start at the beginning, because even thunder gods have parents, family reunions, and at least one dramatic uncle. Thor wasn't just some thundercloud that got really aggressive. He had a proper divine lineage, the kind you'd need an entire tapestry to map out. His father was Odin, the Allfather, chief of the Aesir gods, one-eyed and wisdom-obsessed. His mother, a lesser-known goddess named Jörd, a personification of the earth itself. That makes Thor a child of sky and soil, of storm and stone. It explains a lot, honestly. Thor was strong from the start, with a booming voice and a wild mane of red hair. Unlike Odin, who whispered in riddles and made long-term plans with runes and sacrifice, Thor was more of a smash now, philosophize later kind of guy. He wasn't subtle, but he was brave, and the people loved him for it. Being Odin's son came with perks, but also pressure. Thor grew up in Asgard, the realm of the Aesir gods, a golden stronghold high in the heavens. There, gods feasted, bickered, and occasionally turned into animals. Normal stuff. The divine family tree was tangled. Odin was distant and mysterious, off seeking knowledge or sacrificing eyeballs. Frigg, Odin's wife, tried to keep the peace. Balder, Thor's half-brother, was basically the golden child. Beautiful, gentle, radiant. And then there was Loki, the not technically brother but always, their chaos god, shapeshifter, trickster, the guy who brought drama to every gathering like it was his job. Thor didn't always get along with Loki, but their destinies would be intertwined. Like mismatched roommates in a cosmic sitcom, they annoyed each other constantly, yet kept ending up in the same stories. Thor, for all his might, wasn't exactly a cunning strategist. He trusted quickly, acted boldly, and had a temper like a summer storm, sudden, noisy, and over the top. But even then, there was something pure about his fury. It wasn't scheming or cruel. It was the fury of someone who hated injustice, monsters, and missing dinner. From a young age, Thor took on the role of protector, not of Asgard alone, but of Midgard, the realm of humans. The Norse believed Thor traveled the skies in a chariot pulled by two goats, Tangrisnir and Tangjosta, names that basically translate to tooth gnasher and tooth grinder. Honestly, these goats were the real MVPs. They didn't just pull the chariot, they also doubled as dinner. Thor would eat them, then resurrect them with his hammer. Sustainable eating before it was trendy. Thor didn't just defend humans. He loved them, their fires, their courage, their chaos. Unlike Odin, who watched humanity like a scientist with a clipboard, Thor jumped into their stories, walked among them, and treated them like extended family. Ah yes, the Mjölnir, often translated as giants, though that's a bit of a simplification. They were the original chaotic force, wild primordial beings from Jotunheim, the land of frost and stone and very poor manners. Thor? He made it his personal mission to beat the absolute daylight out of them at every opportunity. He didn't hate all Mjölnir, mind you. He even married one once, or depending on the version, had a child with one. But mostly, his relationship with giants was like a bear with a swarm of bees, constant swatting. Many early stories of Thor involve him traveling to Jotunheim, squaring up with some absurdly tall foe, and returning with either a trophy or a black eye. These battles were more than sport. They were symbolic, order versus chaos, Asgard versus the wilds, civilization versus the untamable. Thor, loud and brash as he was, became a divine wall between humanity and the void. Every hero needs a signature weapon. Thor's wasn't just iconic, it was ridiculously powerful. Mjolnir, the hammer, was forged by dwarves, magical blacksmiths who could craft things beyond imagination. Loki, of course, was involved in its creation. As usual, it started with a prank and ended with something that could level mountains. The hammer was short-handled due to Loki's meddling, classic, but it could flatten mountains, summon lightning return when thrown, like a murder boomerang, shrink to fit inside Thor's tunic, be so heavy that only Thor and a few very select others could lift it. The moment Thor held Mjolnir for the first time, something shifted. The weapon sang to him, not literally, though that would have been fun, but spiritually. It was a perfect match, storm and steel. Mjolnir wasn't just a tool of destruction, it was sacred. It was used in weddings, blessings, and births. It was the hammer that defended the cosmos and hallowed the world, and it made Thor unstoppable. Now that we've gotten to know Thor as a mythological toddler with world-shaking tantrums, let's zoom in a bit. What made Thor Thor? What did he stand for, symbolize, carry, eat, ride, smash, and sanctify? The truth is, Thor wasn't just a hammer-swinging muscle god. He was a divine symbol, an elemental force, and the very embodiment of power in motion. But unlike some aloof deities, Thor's power wasn't mysterious. It was loud, physical, and right there in front of you. Let's start with the star of the show. Not Thor himself, but his trusty hammer, Mjolnir. Mjolnir wasn't just a glorified war mallet. This thing had lore, forged by the sons of Ivaldi, master dwarf craftsmen, commissioned, sort of, by Loki, who had to fix a prank gone wrong by bribing the dwarves with the job, blessed with magic, including returning when thrown, summoning thunder and lightning, being completely unliftable to anyone unworthy, shrinking down to fit inside Thor's tunic. Yes, really. It's a weapon and a spiritual tool. People used replicas of Mjolnir as wedding charms, grave markers, and protective talismans. Even during the Viking Age, as Christianity spread, many Norse wore Mjolnir pendants, sort of like divine resistance bling, and Thor wielded it like a pro. In myths, he was never far from his hammer. If Thor was awake, so was Mjolnir, usually mid-air. Thor wasn't just associated with thunder, he was thunder. The sound of thunder in Norse myth wasn't just a natural phenomenon. It was Thor riding across the sky in his chariot, pulled by his two magic goats, Tangrisnir, Tooth Gnasher, Tangjoster, tooth grinder. Yes, they're names you'd give to a heavy metal duo, and yes, they were cooked and eaten regularly by Thor, then resurrected the next day. As Thor rode, lightning sparked from his hammer. Thunder cracked as the wheels of his chariot rolled across the clouds. The Norse believed that every storm was a battle. Thor fighting giants, spirits, or cosmic forces with sound and fury. Let's talk about those goats again, because truly they are the unsung heroes of Norse mythology. Tangrisnir and Tangjoster didn't just pull a chariot. They were portable meals. Thor would eat them, then raise them from the bones. Magical transportations, symbols of strength and resilience. Imagine living your immortal life, constantly being roasted over a divine campfire, only to be reassembled for the morning commute. That's loyalty. And this detail of Thor relying on animals for transport gives him a connection to the earth and nature, grounding his thunderous power in something a little more humble and cyclical. Thor didn't just have the hammer, he also had Mjölnir, a magic belt that doubled his strength when worn. Jerngripper, iron gloves that allowed him to grip Mjolnir properly. Let's pause to appreciate the imagery here. Thor is already the strongest god, and yet he wears a belt that doubles his power. That's like bringing a cannon to a pillow fight, or a protein shake to Valhalla. But these accessories also highlight Thor's ritual significance. They were sacred symbols, worn only by him, and necessary to properly wield cosmic might. While Odin was a wanderer and Loki a trickster, Thor was something else entirely, the shield. He was the god who stood between humanity and chaos, between Midgard and the Mjölnir, between order and entropy, and he did it with force, but also with devotion. The Norse loved Thor because he protected their homes, blessed their crops, honored marriages, and made sure the storms passed. When you're huddled in a longhouse with rain hammering the roof and wolves howling outside, you don't want poetry. You want a guy with a hammer and 2 angry goats. Despite his temper and appetite, Thor had a sacred side. In Norse religion, he was invoked for marriage ceremonies. His hammer was used to sanctify unions. Birth blessings. Mjolnir was placed on the bellies of mothers. Funeral rites to protect the spirit on its journey. His role was deeply tied to the cycle of life and death, nature and protection. He wasn't just the god of smashing, he was the god of blessing. This duality of violence and tenderness is what made Thor so beloved. He was a warrior who cared, a thunder god who brought peace, a brawler with a soft spot for mortals. And that's a perfect place to pause, take a breath, and get ready for what comes next. Because next, we explore Thor at his most dramatic, his feuds, his grudges, his bar brawls with giants, and that one time he dressed in drag. Yes, that's happening. And so we continue, gentle listener, still wrapped in myth, still resting in that soft space between dream and thunderclap. Because Thor, god of thunder, wasn't just a celestial force of nature. He was a recurring character in what can only be described as the Norse god's long-running dramatic sitcom, always in the middle of a feud, always on the edge of a brawl, always a hair away from flipping the divine dinner table. So fluff your pillow, nestle in just a little deeper, and let your mind wander with us into the very human drama of the most chaotic figure in the Norse pantheon. This isn't just mythology, it's mythological reality TV, and Thor is absolutely the main character. Biceps, bridal gowns and all. The Mjölnir, the cosmic chaos agents of Norse myth. These aren't your fairy tale giants. The Mjölnir are ancient, elemental, and in many ways the personification of untamed nature and entropy. Thor, of course, sees them as the ultimate excuse to break things. Their rivalry is both symbolic and very, very literal. The gods represent order, society, and cosmic structure. The giants, wildness, unpredictability, and that one relative who shows up uninvited. Thor's solution? Hammer first. Questions never. Some notable confrontations. Hrungnir, the stone-headed giant. This one's a classic bar brawl setup. Thor arrives late to the party, challenges Hrungnir to a duel, and wins, but gets pinned under Hrungnir's massive leg. Enter Thor's son, Magni, who lifts the leg with toddler confidence. Because of course his child can bench a boulder. Geirrödr, the giant who captures Thor. Loki, naturally, is involved. Betraying Thor and tricking him into entering Geirrödr's fortress without his hammer or belt of strength. Bad idea. But Thor, armed only with his sheer ability to wreck furniture, hurls a red-hot iron through the giant and his daughters. This is less myth and more divine home renovation, Norse edition. Hymir, Thor's unfortunate fishing buddy, the one where Thor nearly catches Jörmungandr. They go deep-sea fishing. Thor uses an ox head as bait and reels in the world's serpent. It nearly destroys the boat. Hymir panics and cuts the line. Thor sulks. Somewhere, Poseidon rolls his eyes. These battles highlight Thor's role as protector of Midgard, but also his short temper and talent for overkill. He's the cosmic fire extinguisher who also floods the building. Let's take a left turn into comedy. Yes, this is the story where Thor wears a wedding dress. And yes, it's mythologically canonical. Mjölnir is missing. Loki investigates and discovers the giant Thrym has stolen it. Thrym demands Freya's hand in marriage in exchange for the hammer. Freya, ever composed, says no with the force of 1,000 burning suns. So the gods do what any desperate group would. They dress Thor up as Freya. Veil, gown, jewels, everything. Loki, of course, plays the bridesmaid. At the wedding, in Jotunheim, Thor eats an entire ox, 8 salmon, and drinks 3 barrels of mead. Thrym is suspicious. Loki explains, Freya's just really hungry from wedding excitement. When the hammer is brought out to bless the union, Thor grabs it, drops the act, and obliterates everyone. The wedding ends in carnage. As all good Norse celebrations do. It's funny, sure, but also shows how mythology plays with gender, disguise, and clever reversal. Thor may be the hammer god, but he's not above lace and ruse. Thor's romantic life is less chaotic than most gods. His wife, Sif, is famous for her golden hair, which Loki shaves off in a prank gone very wrong. Thor nearly ends Loki's entire career over it. Loki redeems himself, barely, by commissioning dwarves to forge magical new golden hair. Sif's hair glows, Thor grumbles, and all is well. They have children, Thrud, whose name means strength. In one tale, a dwarf named Alvis wants to marry her. Thor talks him into staying up all night, answering riddles until the sun rises and turns him to stone. Romantic dad move. Magni and Modi, sons who survive Ragnarok and carry on Thor's legacy. Magni famously lifts Hrungnir's leg off his father at age 3. Genetics, folks. While Thor isn't known for poetry, his loyalty to his family is thunderously strong. He's that partner who forgets anniversaries but would flatten a mountain range to make up for it. Thor is many things. Subtle is not one of them. In Lokasenna, the famous flighting poem, Loki insults the gods at a feast. When he mocks Thor, the thunder god immediately threatens to bash his skull. Loki, wisely, exits stage left. At another feast, Thor demands a drinking contest. He ends up drinking the ocean, by accident. It's a long story involving illusions, cats that are secretly world serpents, and a witch who is old age personified. But the takeaway is, Thor will never back down from a challenge, even if the challenge is physics. With Odin, his father, there's respectful tension. Odin prizes wisdom and manipulation. Thor, not so much. Their relationship is like a philosopher and a weightlifter trying to co-write a book. Still, Thor is beloved by the common folk for being honest, blunt, and decidedly unpretentious. He's your neighbor who shows up uninvited to a barbecue, but brings a whole roasted boar and 3 barrels of ale. Let's close this section with Thor's biggest frenemy, Jörmungandr, the world serpent, spawn of Loki. So large it circles the earth. Its breath is poison, its body endless, and its destiny is destruction. Their first showdown is that fishing trip. Thor nearly catches it, raises it from the deep, and is furious when Hymir cuts the line. Their final battle, it happens at Ragnarök. Thor kills Jörmungandr, but takes 9 steps before collapsing from the serpent's venom. It's poetic, really. The god of thunder, who could not be defeated by brute strength, is undone not by a sword, but by poison. Myth loves a tragic twist. Thor and Jörmungandr represent cosmic balance. Thor is order, strength, and the wrath of the storm. Jörmungandr is chaos, the abyss, and the unknowable depths. Their clash ends an age. But even now, every storm might be a whisper of their final fight. And with that, we exhale. Thor, in all his feuds, love, and glorious mess, isn't just a god of power. He's a god of passion, one who throws himself fully into the moment, whether he's in battle or in bridal veils. Next, let's follow his echoes into the real world. From Viking rituals to pop culture memes, Thor's legacy is just as loud as his footsteps. Stay cozy. You've followed the thunder through gods and giants, weddings and brawls. And now we gently shift from myth to memory, from thunder in the skies to whispers in the world we walk today. Because Thor, our hammer-wielding main character, didn't fade when the last saga was sung. He echoed. Before Marvel movies, memes, or middle school mythology classes, there were Viking farms. Muddy boots, longhouses, smoked fish, and somewhere above the hearth, a small hammer charm. Because to the Norse people, Thor wasn't just a myth. He was protection. He was weather. He was the sound of safety rolling across the sky. In Viking times, if you were a farmer hoping for rain but not too much, or a warrior praying not to meet your end in the next raid, you turned to Thor. His hammer, Mjölnir, wasn't just a divine weapon. It was a cosmic multi-tool, a symbol of strength, yes, but also of fertility, consecration, and divine approval. Amulets shaped like Mjolnir have been found all across Scandinavia, often worn around the neck like little insurance policies against chaos. Thor's name was invoked at weddings, births, and oaths, calling on his might to bless unions or enforce promises, romantic and legally binding. In Uppsala, Sweden, the historian Adam of Bremen describes a grand temple with 3 primary statues, Odin in the center, Thor on one side, and Freyr on the other. Thor, notably, was the one they turned to when it came to real-world concerns. Thunder, storms, and pestilence. Thor was the people's god. Odin was for kings and poets. But Thor, he was for everyone else, which might be why his legend lasted longer than most. As time marched forward and missionaries arrived with Bibles in hand and crosses around their necks, the age of the old gods began to dim. Slowly, reverently, and often reluctantly, Norse communities turned from Thor's thunder to Christ's compassion. But Thor didn't go quietly. The Christianization of Scandinavia wasn't just a religious transformation. It was a branding war. And Thor's hammer, That was prime logo real estate. Imagine this. You're a Viking in the 10th century. You've got your hammer pendant, maybe silver, maybe bronze. And suddenly, some well-groomed monk in a robe starts telling you to wear a cross instead. The symbolism's similar, they say. Protection, faith, power. But one's associated with a thunder god who punches giants. The other, not so much. For a while, Norse folks wore both. There are graves that feature both Mjolnir and crosses, a kind of divine hedging of bets, just in case. Can't hurt to have backup in the afterlife. But the temples fell silent. The stories stopped being told out loud. The gods, including Thor, began their long hibernation in manuscripts and whispers. And yet, Mjolnir never vanished entirely. It lingered in folklore, in carved stones, in quiet rebellion. In some sagas, post-Christianization scribes soften Thor's image, recasting him less as a god and more as a heroic warrior of the past. A kind of mythological downgrade, from immortal thunder deity to oversized folk hero with a very large hammer. Still, he remained. Even in silence, Thor thundered on. By the time the Renaissance rolled around, think powdered wigs, dramatic lighting, and enough oil paint to flood a fjord, Thor found himself back on the artistic stage. Only now he was framed in golden arches and idealized anatomy. He wasn't just a god anymore. He was art. As scholars across Europe rediscovered classical mythology, they began peeking into the myths of the North too. Thor, with his thunder and bravado, was a natural candidate for dramatic canvases and Baroque storytelling. Imagine a candlelit hall in 17th century Germany. On one wall, Jesus in soft linens. On another, Thor, muscles rippling, locked in mid-battle with the serpent Jörmungandr, hair windswept, eyes aflame. Artistic Thor of this era was less farmer's protector and more mythic superhero painted like a Greek demigod. His hammer was polished, his beard well coiffed. His enemies, usually mid-explosion. In Johann Heinrich Fuseli's works, we find Norse myth emerging with that same tempestuous energy as biblical angels and Greco-Roman heroes. The compositions were explosive. The lighting, cinematic before cinema even existed. In Nordic countries, national romanticism rose in the 1800s. Artists and writers began reclaiming their Norse roots to build cultural pride. Thor became a symbol of strength, identity, and stormy independence. But this Thor was evolving, less divine, more archetype. He represented not only thunder, but resilience. The idea of a primal protector rooted in land, weather, and kin. It was during this period that Thor stopped being just a religious figure and started becoming a cultural icon, one thunderclap at a time. Now, if the Renaissance painted Thor in oil and reverence, the 20th century gave him comic panels, and eventually abs you could grate cheese on, because in the 1960s, the mighty hammer of myth was picked up by none other than Marvel Comics. And from that moment on, Thor the Norse god became Thor the superhero. Less protector of Midgard, more guy in tights who occasionally forgets how doors work. But let's rewind for a moment. Stan Lee, Larry Lieber, and Jack Kirby introduced Thor in Journey into Mystery number 83 in 1962. Their version, a literal god dropped into the American superhero scene. And it worked. Why? Because while Batman was brooding in Gotham and Spider-Man was learning responsibility, Thor was shouting Shakespearean monologues at intergalactic space dragons. His hammer, Mjölnir, now came with very specific user instructions. Only the worthy could lift it. It doubled as a boomerang. And yes, It could open portals through time and space. Because comics. This Thor still had mythological roots: Asgard, Odin, Loki, the Bifrost. But it was all filtered through cosmic fantasy and 1960s Technicolor energy. Ancient runes met ray guns. Valkyries rode flying horses across galaxies. And every speech began with "Verily." Fast forward to the 2010s, and Thor hammers his way onto the big screen. This time played by Chris Hemsworth, aka Australia's most charming protein shake in human form. In Thor 2011, we meet the arrogant Prince of Asgard, who learns humility by living in New Mexico. In Thor Ragnarok 2017, we get comedy, colour, and a lightning-wielding rock star who loses his hammer and gains a personality. In Avengers Endgame, we see Thor's struggles with depression, trauma, and dad bods. A bold, humanizing move for a god known mostly for smashing. This cinematic Thor kept the muscle, but added layers: grief, loss, humor, healing. He was still loud and often confused by Earth customs, but now we related to him. In soft-spoken truth, Thor became more than a superhero. He became a mirror, a being of divine chaos trying to do the right thing, fumbling through friendship, family, and destiny, just like the rest of us, only sweatier. Of course, once you're famous, you become a meme. Thor's face became the face of every bro joke. Another, as he smashes a coffee mug, became shorthand for over-enthusiastic opinions, and his storm-chasing, battle-shouting energy now lives on in TikToks, reaction GIFs, and more than a few "he's just like me for real" posts. The internet did what the Vikings never could. It made Thor emotionally accessible. And in this myth meets modern moment, a new kind of god emerged. One who was both divine and digital, thunderous yet relatable. So here we are, gentle listener. You've followed Thor from ancient hymns to Hollywood blockbusters, from stormy skies to sweaty memes. But what does he mean now, beyond the lightning and leather armor? Let's pull the curtain back a little. Because Thor, at his mythological core, isn't just a thunder god. He's a symbol, a deeply embedded archetype that still echoes in our storytelling, psychology, and even how we understand strength itself. Unlike Odin, the all-knowing, or Loki, the trickster intellect, Thor was never complex in that way. He's not solving riddles. He's not whispering secrets. He's smashing the problem until it stops being a problem. But that simplicity, that's the point. Thor represents a kind of honest strength, the dependable protector, the loud but loyal friend, the one who shows up. He's the working class god, the one who doesn't care for silver tongues or golden crowns. He cares about keeping people safe, about family, about doing what's right, with a side of dramatic overkill. And that has made him one of the most loved figures in mythology, then and now. Even Carl Jung, the grandfather of archetypal psychology, would have a field day with Thor. Thor fits the hero archetype perfectly. He wields a special weapon. He defends his world. He travels between realms, Midgard, Asgard, Jotunheim. He faces the shadow, Jörmungandr. But he also aligns with the child archetype, not because he's immature, but because he has that direct, unfiltered approach to life. Like a child, he's impulsive, emotional, and absolutely sure of his convictions. He throws hammers before asking questions. In dream analysis, hammers, like Mjölnir, can represent tools of transformation, symbols of justice or brute will reshaping reality. So Thor, wielding Mjolnir, isn't just fighting. He's creating clarity through chaos. Once you know the Thor archetype, you start to see it everywhere. Hercules, especially in Disney form. Big, lovable, confused by modern customs, but always ready to protect. The Mandalorian says little, carries a sacred weapon, quietly wrecks everyone in his way to save a child. Wreck. It Ralph. Smashes things, soft-hearted, misunderstood by the system. The Hulk. Pure brute strength tempered by emotional growth. Fun fact, Hulk and Thor even fight in Marvel comics and films. It's the mythic battle all over again. These characters all echo Thor. Simple but noble, strong but tender-hearted, powerful yet relatable. Because beneath the thunder, Thor reminds us what strength really looks like, when it isn't hiding behind mystery or manipulation. In today's world, one full of overwhelming information, moral ambiguity, and emotional burnout, it's no wonder we crave someone like Thor. He doesn't ghost you, he doesn't gaslight, he just shows up and smashes the metaphorical monster threatening your metaphorical crops. There's something deeply comforting in that. In fact, many Norse neo-pagan groups today still honor Thor in their rituals, not because they want to summon lightning, but because they admire his role, the defender of community, the bringer of storms who also clears the skies afterward, the one who drinks deeply, loves loudly, and protects fiercely. He's not just a god of thunder anymore. He's the mythic version of your ride or die friend. And here, as you drift off with the soft hush of history around you, Thor finds one more modern incarnation: sleep storytelling. Because even though his stories are full of chaos, there's a rhythm to them. They follow a simple structure, familiar patterns, wild beginnings that always loop back to protection and calm. He's a bedtime storm, noisy, yes, but protective in nature. The kind of energy that makes you feel safe, even if you don't know why. So maybe that's Thor's final evolution, a thunder god turned thunder blanket. Not just the hammer-swinging champion of the gods, but the reason you can close your eyes and sleep, knowing someone out there would fight frost giants just to make sure you're okay. So next time you hear thunder, or see a red-bearded figure in a comic, or watch someone charge into a situation they only half understand but fully commit to, think of Thor. He may not be perfect, he may not be subtle, but he is, in the most mythological sense of the word, real. Thank you for spending this time in the realm of thunder and myth, and as the storm quiets and the stars return, may your dreams be protected by the mighty hammer of Mjölnir itself, softly echoing in the distance like a lullaby from the gods. Good night, gentle listener, and may the gods of sleep and storytelling keep watch over your slumber.